local history, local culture, local events, your community. This is the Joe Kelly Show.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Frank Tomaino is our guest. It's always a fun time to have Frank come in because we talk about local history and some nostalgia and brings things to mind that we haven't thought of in a long time. Always good to see you, Frank.
Yep, great to be here.
And thanks for coming in on short notice today. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Last week we had Howard Bushinger on the show. We were talking about North Utica. And Howard touched on, and I didn't get we just ran out of time. I didn't get a chance to follow up on this, but Howard was talking about North Utica and how the railroad said to the powers that be in Utica, you better do something about the flooding on this Mohawk River because we're going to stop service to Utica unless you do. Mm-hmm. And of course that led to a whole series of things that happened, a new station, rechanneling, all that. Talk about that, Frank.
Well, you talk about Union Station in New York Central. Yeah, in the early 20th century, New York Central had big plans for Utica. People forget Utica in the 1890s, early 1900s, was one of the fastest growing cities in the country. You had political leaders, so New York Central at that time, they had their stations, main stations were for Utica, from New York City to Albany, Albany to Syracuse, Albany to Utica, and Utica to Chicago. And then they decided what they were going to do was eliminate Albany and have New York City directly to Utica and then Utica to Chicago. So what they did, they were going to plant a big passenger station in Utica, which they built, a big freight station. The Utica freight station was one of the biggest in the world at one time. But the big problem was flooding, because as you know, the Mohawk River flowed right through what is now Bagg Square. And of course, the city of Utica was interested in supporting this project, and so they had to find some way to get rid of the flooding. And what they thought was relocate the Mohawk River 1 mile to the north, where it is today. But there was a lot of controversy. It'd be very expensive. And anyway, they made a deal. The state, I think, paid 25%. The city paid 25%, and New York Central paid 50%, and they relocated the river. But the big problem before that was flooding. And the Central had planned to build $1 million station, Union Station, but they said, we don't want passengers, with a rowboat rowing to the trains.
Well, where was the station prior to this?
Oh, no, same where Utica had 3 train depots, and they were all located on Main Street where Union Station is today. The first one was a little bit to the north, but in that same location. And the second one, and then of course Union Station. When they were building Union Station, they built a temporary depot a little bit to the north of Union Station, about where Wirtz Ave is now, while they were building Union Station. And then when that was completed in 1914, but it's an interesting story how at one time Utica was going to be the main, and by the way, New York Central had to abandon that plan because the people in Albany complained. And they had a lot of political clout. Yeah. The unions got involved. They're going to lose a lot of jobs because Utica was going to replace Albany as the main. So Utica still became a major place, but not like it would have been.
Yeah, and the reason it's called Union Station has nothing to do with unions, though.
No, it's Union Station because when it first started it was New York Central, and then they invited 2 other railroads, the New York, Ontario Western, and the Delaware Lackawanna, moved their offices there, uniting the 3 railroads. They didn't merge, but they were all in the same station. And that's not unusual. There are many cities that have a union station because there's more than one railroad there.
Frank, whenever I'm talking about Union Station, I think about my younger days, much younger days. And I was always intrigued by how you got from the beautiful lobby of Union Station, beautiful lobby, to the tracks.
Yeah, that's, what do they call it? There's not a tunnel.
Yeah.
I forget what they called it, but yeah, you were underground and you walked there and there were maybe 7 or 8 signs like track through, track 3. There were benches. And I remember always in the springtime, there'd always be water.
Mm-hmm.
Water would always, I've got a lot of memories of Union Station. I remember during World War II, the USO in the southwest corner had a station because I think I read one time there were almost 70 trains a day stopped in Utica during the war, and many of them had GIs who maybe were changing trains or had 2 hours to, and when they'd go to the USO and have a ham sandwich right home, and I remember as a kid going there, and when I was in the service, during the Korean War, I was stationed at Springfield, Mass, Westover Air Force Base, and I would travel by train back and forth whenever I had a pass or anything. And sometimes, you know, my father would drop me off maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd be in Union Station alone, waiting for a train. And, you know, it was really, it was something, you know.
I remember writing a column about, they were doing some renovations, and you're absolutely right, the southwest corner of Union Station. DMV is in there now, Department of Motor Vehicles.
Yeah.
And they were doing some renovations in there years ago, and they came across some artwork.
Oh, there were paintings, I'm forgetting his name, a well-known artist from Munson Williams Proctor painted murals along a U.S.
And I think they're still there.
I was going to say, I doubt if anybody painted them over. You know, the next time I'm around there, I'm going to take a look there.
Yeah.
It wasn't a very large place, but I think I read somewhere that during the 3-4 years it was open during World War II, 41 to 45, 46, something almost 50, 60,000 soldiers, because they would sign, stop there. In fact, there were so many soldiers there. Around the corner is the Baggs Memorial, that little yellow brick building. And because there were so many GIs coming back and forth, military police set up headquarters there. And they had there was never any problem. The military police would police the area.
At least they found a use for that building. I wish they could find a use for it today, make use of that great building. Frank Tomaino's our guest. We're talking local history. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Frank Tomaino is our guest. We're talking some local history. We were talking about Union Station, and before we get off that topic, Frank, thank goodness that station was preserved. It came close to the Wreckers Ball.
It came very, very close. In fact, the same week that they were talking about tearing down Union Station and the Stanley Theater. I just can't believe a wrecking ball going into those two buildings. The Stanley Theater, of course, was saved, and Union Station. Really, and I mentioned this before. Nick Calogero was our assemblyman, and he got some state money to fix the roof, and then the balls start rolling, and then Sherry Bollert became county executive, and he was interested in it, and before you know it, the county, the state, they were pouring money into it. And you go there now, I don't have to tell you, you go down there now, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean,
And one of the nice things also, speaking of county executives, County Executive Pacente was the driving force behind saving and renovating that REA building.
yes, yep.
And now they use it for farmers market.
Or, yeah, yeah.
I know he's looking for other uses of that because that's a historic building unto
Oh,
itself.
sure, that whole area, I mean, that's where the city started, and in fact, I had, in my column, I had a photo of, there was a sketch, 1760, 2 years after it was built by the British, a sketch of the fort.
Old Fort Schuyler?
Fort
Yeah.
Schuyler, which, in fact, just east of Union Station and that whole area. And in fact, thanks to the county historian Joe Bettini and Pacente, and they put money into that. It's going to be a mini park now. Just about, maybe, I don't know, a couple hundred yards east of Union Station, where the original fort was. So that whole area, Union Station, REA, it's just so
Yeah.
historic, so
So-
much history.
So railroad tracks then probably go over where the fort was, huh, Frank?
A little bit to the north, just a few feet to the north. In fact, I always thought it was where the railroad tracks are now. But Joe Bettini did some research, and it's just along Main Street. But the railroad tracks just go just a little bit to the north. Yeah.
And when we're talking about Old Fort Schuyler, we're not talking about a Fort Stanwix kind of fort.
Oh, no. It was, in fact, as far as I know, it was never garrisoned. It was mainly in 1758, during the French and Indian War. The British built Fort Stanwix to protect the carrying place. We've talked about that before, and also built Fort Schuyler, what is now Utica, to protect the ford in the Mohawk River. There was a shallow spot.
An FORT to protect the FORD.
Exactly. Very, very good. Yep, very good. And it was really, before that, Native Americans, all the Indian trails, north and south, led to that spot because you could actually walk across the Mohawk River, which was much wider and bigger than it is today. So they built that fort, and we've talked about this before, where during the Revolutionary War, there was no Fort Stanwix. I'm surprised that they still call it Fort Stanwix, because Stanwix was named after a British general who built it in 1758. So when the Americans took it over during the Revolutionary War, they didn't want to be in a fort named for a British general, so they renamed it Fort Schuyler. And so some wise guy said, wait a minute, you can't name it Fort Schuyler. We got a Fort Schuyler 12 miles to the east, where Utica is now.
To the west.
To the east.
Oh,
I mean, Utica's to the east, yeah.
Yeah.
So during the war, Fort Stanwix today was Fort Schuyler, and they renamed Fort Schuyler Old Fort Schuyler.
Yeah.
And it became Old Fort Schuyler. It was, even after the war, it was a hamlet. Then in 1798, it was incorporated as a village, and many of the villagers said, Old Fort Schuyler's too long of a name, we need a shorter name, and Utica was picked instead. Yep.
One of the things that I find fascinating is that the reason that we have a Utica, the reason we had the fort, is because, as you pointed out, that fording place, Fording, and the reason we had that fording place was because of a creek that still runs there.
Reels Creek in North Utica, which I believe rises somewhere in the Adirondacks, and through the centuries, flowing down through what is now North Utica, it would flow directly into the Mohawk River. And a lot of the debris and the silt from the Adirondacks over the centuries built in the Mohawk River. I'm forgetting what they call it now, but it was getting, before you know it, there was like a little hill of dirt
A little
across there.
sandbar or something like that.
A sandbar.
Yeah.
And you could actually wade across it, and and again, as I said, all the Indian trails the north-south Indian trails led to that place. So it was a very vital spot in the Mohawk River.
And what I find interesting too, Frank, is that creek, Reels Creek, I've seen different spellings of the name Reel, but Reels Creek still flows under North Genesee Street and empties into the
Barge Canal.
Barge Canal.
Yeah, or the Erie Canal now.
Yeah, it keeps changing its.
Yeah, but you're right. That is flows under Genesee, about not too far from Deerfield Corners there.
And another one that gets forgotten a lot is Baloo Creek.
Yeah, I've never written. Yeah, Baloo Creek was very, very important. I've never written that much about Baloo Creek, but that emptied into the Mohawk River too. And in fact, it flowed through a part of East Utica, what is now the Quinn Playground. And I remember even today, if you drive along Lansing Street and Blandina Street, between 1st Street, 2nd, and 3rd Ave, you'll come in a little dip. That's when they filled in Baloo Creek.
Yeah.
And in fact, Baloo Creek, where is now the Quinn Playground on Rutger Street, even when I was a kid, I remember there was like a gully there.
Yeah.
And Baloo Creek flowed right through there.
I've seen pictures of like a trestle that crossed over there with Baloo Creek coming in. Frank Tomaino's our guest. We're talking local history. Short break. Right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Frank Tomaino is our guest. Frank is the guy that we talk local history with. And we've been talking about the beginnings of Utica. I wanted to talk to you, though, Frank. It's my fault. We kind of got off on different things. But I wanted to talk to you about this series that I've been watching. I think it's on PBS, on Benjamin Franklin. What a fascinating life he led. My goodness.
Well, in my column, I've been writing about the Revolutionary War, and I've been writing about Benjamin Franklin in France.
Was he our ambassador, Frank?
His title was commissioner. He was, Congress appointed him commissioner to France with the main purpose of trying to get France to aid us during the Revolutionary War with money and arms, which they did, mainly because of Benjamin Franklin. There were two others there with him. Arthur Lee and Silas Deane, but Ben Franklin was it's funny. In fact, as I was driving up to the studio, I was thinking, because we had mentioned we were going to talk about Ben Franklin, and while Ben Franklin was there, the Congress also decided to send John Adams to France to help Benjamin Franklin get money from France. So when he arrived, and of course, Franklin and Adams knew each other from Congress, worked on the Declaration of Independence, were friendly. And they were always friends. But when he arrived, Franklin was staying in a luxurious hotel. People forget, Franklin was a rock star. Before the Revolutionary War and he was known throughout the world. He was a scientist, a philosopher, statesman, a writer, journalist. And when he invited Adams to live with him in the hotel, so Adams accepted. And as I was driving up there, I started to laugh because as I did research on what was happening while they were there, it reminded me of the old Odd Couples, Oscar Madison and Felix Unger.
Yeah.
Benjamin Franklin being Oscar Madison and John Adams being Felix Unger. Adams woke up 5 o'clock in the morning, all business, went to the desk, began writing, all business. Franklin maybe would get up 11, 12 o'clock, have breakfast in bed, invite a lot of ladies to dine with him. And just the opposite of John Adams. They worked together and they were successful getting France to aid us during the war. Thank God they did, or we wouldn't have won the war.
Yeah.
But Franklin, again, just a fascinating character. Yeah.
One of the things that they focused a little bit on, the Franklin series on PBS, was a very young Frenchman who came over here as an officer.
Lafayette?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the Marquis. I think he was 19 years old.
Yeah.
And within a year, he was a major general. And he earned it. I mean, he fought in a lot of battles.
But can you imagine, 19?
19 years old. And Washington considered him his son, really. And as I said, at the battles of Brandywine and then later on, Lafayette, he fought. In fact, at the Battle of Brandywine in southern Pennsylvania, this is before Valley Forge, he was wounded, shot in the leg, and he was bleeding to death. And doctors couldn't stop the bleeding. Washington sent his doctor, Dr. John Cochran.
From Utica?
That's another story. He's buried at Forest Hill.
Yeah.
To Brandywine and said, treat him as if he were my son. Cochran stopped the bleeding and saved Lafayette's life. Many years later in France, Lafayette, writing his autobiography, said he was saved at the Battle of Brandywine by good Madeira wine and the talents of Dr. John Cochran, who never lived in Utica. His sons did. John Cochran is now buried at Forest Hill Cemetery. He was Washington's physician and Surgeon General of all of the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War.
You know, speaking of Lafayette, he came through, not our area exclusively, but he came through the entire Mohawk Valley on almost like a triumphant tour.
1824-25, he toured the United States. 1825 in June, he ended up in Utica, traveling from Whitesboro along Rome Road, which was renamed Lafayette Street, Fayette Street, and now Lafayette Street. And while he was here, in fact, at Hotel Utica, there's a plaque still there facing Lafayette Street that that Lafayette passed through. He stayed at Baggs Hotel during the afternoon. He visited President John Adams. At that time, it was President John Quincy Adams' niece, who lived in Utica, where the Bank of the Gold Dome Savings Bank later was built. I mean, it's just fascinating. Once you start doing research, you come across all this local history. But Lafayette did stop in Utica, and
I think the night before he stopped in Whitestown, didn't he?
Whitestown, Colonel Lansing.
I can't
Oriskany.
remember. Yeah.
I think Colonel Lansing was in Oriskany, and then he stopped, I think, overnight in Whitesboro. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reception he got when he came through here was quite something. Yes.
Yeah. When in fact he arrived, there was a beautiful stagecoach with 6 white, magnificent horses, and the driver was Theodore Faxton. Theodore Faxton had been a stagecoach driver as a young man, so he knew what he was doing. So when he arrived in this beautiful stagecoach and a huge reception, what is now the busy corner, thousands of people, General Lafayette was and this was almost 50 years after the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
So he was an older man now. And
one of the things that I'm sad that they didn't bring out in this PBS, maybe they will down the line, I don't know, but they talked about how France came into the war, as you said, and swung it for the United States side. And they said because of what happened at Saratoga. And I wish they would have said because of what happened at
There would have been no Saratoga if it wasn't for
Right.
Oriskany.
Yeah, yeah.
Battle of Oriskany.
Yeah. And they
I'm convinced.
Yeah, well, I am convinced too, and I've said to superintendents at Fort Stanwix for years that had it not been for the Battle of Oriskany and Fort Stanwix, we'd be carrying British passports
Exactly. Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
That's going to do it. We're out of time.
Wow, holy mackerel. Yep.
We never got to a lot of the stuff that
That's
I had,
okay, no problem.
but I know where to reach you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frank. That's it for this week. We'll be back next week. We'll do it all again. Don't forget CNYhomepage.com. Until next time, take care of yourself, everybody.